Hey, it's Lauren here. Welcome back to another episode of Market Like a Mother, where we are debunking myths this season in marketing. And today we are going to be talking about the myth that the customer is always right. It's going to be myself, Lauren Karwoski, and Karen Cummings, founder and CEO of Radiant Marketing. So let's get started. Hey, Karen, how are you?
Good. How are you, Lauren?
I'm good. I'm super excited. We're back talking about another myth here, which is the myth that the customer is always right. And you and I were just talking a little bit about this before getting started, and I feel like we have a lot of good insights to share today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is like an age-old myth, right? Or something that every business owner has heard from the beginning of time is that the customer is always right. And there's a lot of nuances to this. So I'm excited to break this topic down.
Yeah, absolutely. When we first were kind of discussing making this our topic for today, I was thinking back to my first ever job when I was a waitress and I was 16. And like the amount of times I heard this, the customer is always right. It was like ingrained in my mind. And I feel like a lot of people have that similar experience from the time we're young. It's that, whatever the customer wants, that's the best route. And obviously for you as an agency owner, I feel like you almost probably had to unlearn some of that and kind of learn how to guide your customers, listen to their feedback, and kind of always have their best intentions in your head. So definitely kind of unlearning those behaviors that I feel like we've been kind of taught from a young age.
Yeah, well, and that ties into like this idea of people pleasing, right? Which I think you and I are victim to, wanting to make sure everybody's happy all the time. And I know a lot of probably our listeners are the same way. And so as soon as you find out that someone's unhappy about something or they're giving criticisms, it's really hard to not either like immediately try to resolve that and address it in like the best way, make sure that everything is like exactly perfect the way they want it, and like to not take it personally. So I think you're right. Like there's some like deeply embedded beliefs there that like need some new perspective. And then just like from a business perspective, the idea that we don't just need to bend over backwards to make sure everybody is extremely happy about everything that's going on. Like we already know based on previous conversations on this podcast too, that we're not going to appeal to everyone. If we're doing our business right, we're going to deeply resonate with the smallest viable audience, which means there will always be people that don't love everything about what you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that it is a tough pill to swallow. I feel like you and I have talked about that many times in different scenarios. I was even thinking back to one of our previous episodes where we were talking about, the myth that marketing moves too fast and chasing trends. And I feel like this was a perfect example because I feel like we've had a lot of clients that come to us kind of seeking that virality, that viral moment. They want to, explode on social media. And we kind of have to almost walk them through how the data and the short-term trend chasing burns them out faster. It's not a sustainable strategy, and kind of you know not that they're not right in their right to want to go viral and chase those social moments, but that's kind of a perfect example of us needing to guide the client, staying true to our beliefs, our values at Radiant, and kind of making sure that they feel that they're still supported in their opinions, because that's super super important, but making sure that we also support them with our knowledge as well.
Yeah, because ultimately, like, I mean, we want to drive the greatest results for our clients, just like we know our clients want to drive the greatest results for their customers. So if they're focused on the impact that they're trying to make and they stay aligned with their mission, vision, and values, then I think you can have a really thoughtful, intelligent conversation with customers when they are giving feedback about something that they dislike or stuff that they think should change about what you're offering. And like, that's a perfect example. Another one that I would say would be, with our clients specifically and just business owners in general. And I'm guilty of this as well, is like you want to get started on the tactical side. You want to start pushing those ads out or, pushing the blog posts live, but skip the strategy piece. And time again, we've found that if you do that foundational work first, the tactical stuff, the implementation execution will be that much more effective. So it's all about, again, staying aligned to your values as an organization, staying focused on what's best for your customer, and then having a very intentional and helpful conversation with customers when those opportunities arise.
Absolutely. And now thinking about kind of like the pain points here, as an agency owner, have you ever had the fear of negative reviews or losing business when you're setting those boundaries? Is that something that kind of plays in your mind when you're having these conversations?
Yeah, I was actually just on a podcast with Hot Air Expeditions, and we were talking about this because obviously they have a lot of people that sign up to do a hot air balloon ride and they have factors that completely are outside of their control, like the weather, for example.
Yes.
And so, of course, safety for them is the top priority. And that means that sometimes they have to cancel flights. And that means you've got some unhappy people that have planned trips around these hot air balloon rides or are like very much so looking forward to this experience. But since safety is the most important piece, then they have to get canceled. So they'll see, 1-star reviews go up. That's like, oh, this got canceled and this is so terrible. And so to answer your question, I feel like there's always that chance, especially now in the world that we live in. People are so prone to hop right online and share a negative experience as fast as they can. And so I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but I think having that feedback loop in place and making sure you're giving customers an opportunity to share that feedback directly with you before it gets published online is super important too.
Yeah, I agree. And I definitely feel for them. That's a tough kind of business angle to have to work with. But again, I think kind of the theme as I was thinking about this is people confuse great service with never saying no. And again, in that situation, saying no is truly vital for them. I mean, that is the epitome of them putting their customers' best interest in mind, especially when it comes to safety. So definitely something to think about there. As we're getting into the myth, like always, we like to give you guys a little bit of framework here. So we're going to give you some building blocks of healthy client-customer relationships. This is something obviously we experience at Radiant from the agency client standpoint, but then also we see our clients firsthand dealing with, these similar issues internally with their customers. So it's all about, again, giving the customer kind of what they need, and which might not always be what they think that they want. Our framework here, and then we'll kind of take you through it a little bit more in depth. But as always, we have clarity. That's been a big one for us always.
Yep.
We have communication, confidence, and expertise, and compassion. So we have the four C's this week, actually. That'll be a good way to remember it. We have the four C's. So clarity, obviously you want to be upfront with pricing, processes, expectations from the start. I think that's where a lot of these kind of disagreements could stem from, is that there might be miscommunications where the customer feels like they're not actually, getting the services that they signed up for. In the case of hot air, they signed up for a hot air balloon ride that's not happening. But I'm sure, they are clear. Maybe it was just misunderstood about setting expectations in terms of weather and things like that. So kind of making sure that clear communication is upfront, that definitely helps build the trust.
Yeah. And I think so. Just some other examples too might be like if you're an e-commerce company, say you're selling supplements or nutritional products, making sure that your return policy, that your shipping policy, all those things are crystal clear so they know when to expect the product. If they, don't like the product, are they able to return it? How long do they have? So clarity across all aspects is super critical. And I think that also allows you to, when those difficult conversations may arise. So if it is like, if you're a service-based business and you have, very structured onboarding process where you are setting those expectations for your new clients or patients, you can point back to that. If they come back and say, hey, well, this is, what I was thinking and this is how it should be. And you can say, hey, like, here's our policy. We shared this with you, on the website, or we shared this with you in our onboarding call. Like, and then you can make decisions at that point too, is like, depending on that certain scenario, maybe there are some exceptions you might make. Or you hold firm on those boundaries and make sure that you're just reinforcing those policies. But if you do that up front, then it's a lot easier to have those conversations, and it gives them ownership too over, that complaint or the feedback they're giving, saying, oh, that's right. Like, I remember now that we did talk about this.
Absolutely. And again, I think a lot of it comes back to trust too. When you have those, clear expectations outlined at first, the customer is going to trust you. They're going to have faith that you, again, have their best interest in mind, which I feel like a lot of this conflict could be avoided when the customer truly does feel that you have their best interest in mind. And that's really, really important for any business owner, truly. Kind of going off. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I was just going to add to that too. Hold on. No. With most of our clients, a lot of our clients being in the health space, I think another really important expectation to set and item to have clarity around is kind of those outcomes, right? So if you're like in fitness or nutrition and you're trying to help your client or patient achieve a specific result, is always being really clear on what it's going to take to get them there. That results vary by individual. what their role will be in that, achieving those outcomes. So I know, that that's such an important point of, or can become an important point of contention, is if they're like, hey, I signed up for this program and I expected after 4 weeks to be seeing this type of outcome or result. And then again, you can kind of point back to that framework or those expectations and the different roles, and help them to understand, why that might not have been what they expected it to be. But upfront clarity for sure.
I agree. And I feel like with clarity also comes to being realistic. I feel like as a business owner, you want to always assume that the best case scenario is going to happen. So like, again, with a health brand, it's, this treatment or this process is going to directly get you these results. You want to believe the best. You want to believe that it's going to work. But also I think in the health space too, being realistic is so important, because again, let's say you have a workout program, it's 8 weeks and you're guaranteeing abs at the end of these 8 weeks and your client doesn't see that, it's obviously that's going to hurt the trust. That's going to hurt the clarity. The customer's going to feel like they didn't get what they signed up for. So again, I think with clarity also comes, realistic expectations. That's really important too. And as a business owner, again,
Absolutely.
I think it can be, you could want to think that it's always going to be the best, but you do have to kind of make sure that your expectations are realistic too.
Absolutely.
And then that also kind of leads into communication. And this is something, Karen, you and I had talked about before. Kind of when you think of marketing that could be self-serving, sometimes, I know I could be a little strong-willed. I could think that I want to almost like win, if the customer is giving me pushback and I know I have the expertise and I have, the data to back me up. I almost have this inkling in me to want to win the disagreement and prove that, I'm right to the customer, but that is absolutely not the goal. The goal is to stay aligned. The goal is to have the customer's best interest in mind. And it's really, almost you have to let go of that ego as well too, of knowing that you're an expert in your field, but, making sure that it's about staying aligned. It's not about proving that necessarily to the client.
Yeah, I love that. That's so, so important. It's human nature, right, to want to be right. And so I think, putting on and like allowing yourself a pause, especially when it comes to, say, reviews that are posted online, if you like respond to that right away to say, hey, here's why how you feel about this is not right. I think it's important. And I know we'll talk about compassion as well, but like to have empathy for their situation, whether, they're unhappy with a specific thing that was controllable or not. And I think that helps to kind of shift your perspective too, and go into the conversation a little bit differently. And yes, totally agree. That the outcome, if your desired outcome is to prove that you're right, then in the end, you will not be doing any good for your business or your customer. And so I think if you stay focused on best serving them and supporting them, then your conversation will go a lot differently. And I think in the end, majority of the time, if you're dealing with people that are reasonable in some way, you'll come to a better, you'll come to a better outcome.
Absolutely.
But I do think this ties back to what we were saying earlier, though, is not just the quality of communication, but also like the cadence and the opportunities for communication. So having some sort of customer feedback loop in place, whether that's your e-commerce and you've got kind of a post-purchase sequence or something where customer care can reach out to you. We just implemented this for one of our clients too. So they have a chance to communicate with your team directly before they publicly share any dissatisfaction about things that may not have even been within your control. So you can have a lot more involvement in that conversation before it's taken to the online channels.
Exactly. And I also feel like in a world of AI, the customer feedback loop is so important, because I know I've had times of frustration where I've had an issue with a product or a service and I'm just trying to get a hold of anyone to talk about it. And usually it's the not being able to get communication is what would fuel me to leave a negative review or kind of take it in a more public manner. So I'm like, that's such a huge one, is having your customer feel like they have access to you, whether it's a question or it's just a simple, piece of feedback that they have for you. I feel like nothing is more frustrating as the customer to feel like you've purchased this good or this service and now you can't get a hold of anyone. So I think that is super important given, the world of AI robots and AI chatbots.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because yes, absolutely. And I think that's, something that can set your business apart from competitors too, and is increasingly important if you have like a membership where you're expecting renewals from members, or like a high ticket item. So if you're selling something expensive and they can't get a hold of you, it's not going to bode well. So definitely, I think access is such an important piece, making sure that your customers who have purchased from you once or twice or ongoing for years have easy access to address any concerns or questions that they have. And then, yes, from an AI perspective, right, we've been talking about the ecoverse on some of these episodes and just how important, or even just how much more important now customer feedback is online and what those conversations are saying, because that is what LLMs are using to communicate back to new people searching for your solutions. And you want to make sure that if you can't control that conversation, that you're at least involved in that conversation. So say for whatever reason you weren't able to provide access to a customer that was trying to communicate with you, and they end up, posting something online or going to Reddit to share their experience. At a minimum, be involved in that so that you can, again, not win the conversation necessarily, but show that you're actively involved in addressing concerns and helping to serve your customers. And then that piece of information, those replies, will be factored into the LLM's overviews and summaries so that it's not completely biased to the customer's feedback. But yeah, absolutely, it's becoming even more important for us to stay active in brand related and even industry related conversations online.
I agree. And I feel like that totally leads us into our next one, which is confidence and expertise. So, again, if you are seeing these reviews online, you're seeing this conversation happening, I think it's important too to remember you're the business owner, you're the agency owner, you do have that expertise and to own that, even in times of maybe getting negative feedback. And I know that we see it from an agency standpoint of wanting to assure our clients that we're in good hands. And it's so important for the clients to also ensure their customers that they're in good hands. So again, it's not about saying no, it's kind of about redirecting so that you can improve those client outcomes.
Yeah. And I feel like this was like a journey I went on when I first started my agency over 10 years ago to now, where, initially I think, especially being newer in the space, having just started out with my agency, like I didn't have as much confidence, but rather than like leaning into that collaborative process, I kind of got like more defensive, and that, never works out well. So over time and fairly quickly, I learned to take that more collaborative approach. And so if you're a service-based business or, another agency listening to this, I think that, we know that we are the experts in what we do, but our clients are often the experts in what they do. So making sure that we're taking their feedback in a way that does ultimately help to shape and refine what we're providing them with to create a even better outcome, I think is really important. So don't discount what you know by any means. Like this is, you've invested so many hours and years in what you're doing, but also don't discount what they know, because they have a perspective that you don't have. And that's very important when you're thinking about, how you're offering your services or what features are involved in your products. So it kind of goes two ways.
Absolutely. And I feel like in the health and wellness space, the confidence is so important because you also have to put yourself in the customer's shoes and think, if I'm going to get a product or service, especially something that's directly related to my health, and the person I'm purchasing it from seems unsure, that's instantly not going to make me feel good.
Yeah.
It's not going to make me feel confident either. I'm thinking of, we work with an esthetician. If I went to my esthetician and I was like, should I do XYZ? And she's like, well, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm instantly like, well, you should know. You're the expert. That doesn't make me feel good. So it's definitely too, it's remembering why you're in this business, why you started your business, and remembering kind of that your customers are looking to you for guidance, not just agreement. So it's really important to keep your confidence there.
Yeah, I love that. And almost like on the flip side of that too is the idea that we're not just trying to force our way. And even if you have great intentions, I think it's easy for us to forget, if you are an expert in a certain thing, what customers don't know, right? So you're like, oh, this is obvious, or this is a fact. I've known this for years. Like I think is, and this ties to compassion as well, which we'll talk about last year, but is understanding that the explanation behind your recommendation or the thought behind the features of your product is so helpful, because they're likely not thinking of that. They're just thinking about what they want, which, like you said earlier, is not necessarily what they need. I think Marie Forleo says, give them what they want, show them what they need. And so I think that's such an important distinction, is the want versus need. And until you educate people sometimes on like the why behind that, then they won't know. They'll still think that their way is best for themselves, and in some cases it may not be.
Absolutely. That's a great point too, because I even feel like we could forget about that in times of, working from an agency standpoint of, we know so much that's going on behind the scenes in terms of the data and the stats and the research. And obviously it's, conveying that to the customer too is super important, because you could kind of get lost in your own little world when it's your bubble of what you do professionally. But yeah, that kind of leads us to compassion. Compassion is a big one. Holding firm to those boundaries, but still leading with empathy. I feel like it's really important, and you kind of talked about this, to validate what the client or the customer feels.
Yeah.
That you don't want them to feel that you are looking down on their belief or their opinion in terms of what they think is best for their business. Obviously, they care about their business too, and they are trying to, make the best decisions. But it's about kind of guiding them towards the better choices based on your own expertise.
Yeah, and not to say we all have to be therapists, but yeah, just starting with, I'm sorry that you feel this way.
Always.
Yeah, totally. Because I think, again, and this is where that pause can be helpful when you're responding to customers on things, whether that's reviews, emails, or however they're communicating this, and allowing yourself some grace and space to respond in a way that's going to be constructive, because everyone's experience is different, and you never know what's going on in someone else's life. And so they might be venting some frustrations that have nothing to do with your business or your product. But if we can hold, a compassionate space to hear them out, and then again, serve them to the best of our abilities for, with the offering that we have, then I think, you're going to have a much better chance of resolving that point, that friction, or even like elevating that relationship. So like we've seen before, you can create deeper loyalty and connection with someone that has some initial bad experience if you address it appropriately, quickly, and like completely, and then they come back around and are advocates for your brand. So I think that that's like a super important thing for us, just as, from like one of our core values at Radiant is the human-centric approach, which I think is, compassion is at the center of that.
Absolutely. And I feel like too, we talk a lot about brand loyalty, or kind of how now it's so important than ever to kind of build a following, like a loyal following of your brand. And I feel like that compassion directly helps build that over time. If you're showing your customer that you're listening, that you care, that you're there, that you're taking their feedback and their considerations, that's just going to turn them into, that loyal long-term brand advocate, someone who, like you said, is going to be out there almost doing your marketing for you, which is what we love. Some little like trick here that I try to apply to my own marketing and my own kind of conflict resolution here. My mom's a second grade teacher, and she always used to tell us to do I and then we statements. So to say like, I hear you, I understand why you'd feel that way. And then to follow it up with like, how are we going to go from here? And I was just kind of thinking, as silly as it is, and it does feel very second grade level, I think it's a great way when you're dealing with customers or a client who you might be having these, kind of unalignment moments with, to be able to say like, I do hear you and understand you, and put yourself in their shoes. But then again, remember that it's how are we going forward? It's, you're in this together, you're a unit, you're in this partnership. So it's kind of always putting the I aside and then leading with the we. So some little trick there.
I love that. Well, and like as a mom with littles, like, my kids are getting a little bit older now, but that whole gentle parenting aspect, and I know you can have your opinions on that approach or not, but I feel like that ties exactly to that, like letting people feel their feelings, and then, figuring out a solution together. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, and that being said, I have a question for you. I mean, we went over the 4 C's, we talked about this, but which of these do you feel personally is the most challenging for you, given your position?
I would probably say definitely not compassion. I feel like I am certainly a very compassionate person. I think over the years, the confidence in my own expertise has grown. I think that everyone kind of experiences a little bit of imposter syndrome here and there. So I would probably say clarity, especially with what we do, because there are so many components, and there can be a lot of gray area when it comes to digital marketing. So, our approach with clients is fairly flexible too, which gives them an opportunity and us an opportunity to pivot some within the strategy and plans that we put in place, which can create a little less clarity. So I think that's something, I'm always kind of working on, is to make sure I'm setting really clear expectations up front, that our client onboarding process is really helpful, that we're all going into this feeling super aligned, that we know what the goals are, we know who's responsible for what. But I think that would probably be the one that I've, been challenged with the most.
Yeah, I was genuinely thinking the same thing as you were talking. I feel like, and you and I both, I feel, struggle with this. We get so excited. And like you said, it's like we could
Mm.
almost want to rush to deliver these results. And also just know if you like book a discovery call with us, we're already like in Google Chat talking about you and researching you and what your ideas could look like with us. We get very excited. And I feel like the clarity part, being able to slow down and explain the strategy more to our clients, not just being like, oh my gosh, we're so excited, let's jump right into it. So that's definitely something I feel like I have been working on a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like we're so fortunate in that we work with clients that are so aligned with our own team's personal values as well. Being in the health space is so rewarding. We know that the clients that we're aligned with and working with are having such a great positive impact on the world. And one of our taglines is bringing possibilities to life, right? So we get very excited about bringing possibilities to life. I agree with Lauren on
Yes.
that.
Yes, but we're working on our clarity. We're less excitement, more clarity. That's my 2026 motto. And then we'd always love to leave you guys with some reflection questions too. So it's just some things to kind of audit your own processes, some things to think about this week. So, do I set clear expectations with my clients or customers? Am I confident in saying no when needed? And again, we know that one's much easier said than done. Do my clients see me as a trusted guide or just a service provider?
Mm-hmm.
And have I built a space in my process to listen and explain my reasoning? So, again, that customer feedback loop that we stressed is so important. So, those are some
Yep.
easy ways to just kind of audit your own business this week and kind of take a look at, am I really providing an environment where my customers trust me for guidance and I can say no and have firm boundaries, to deliver those best results?
Absolutely. Yep. Great reflection questions.
I love it. I love it. So some more takeaways. The customer isn't always right. That's our myth. We debunked that today, but they do deserve respect and they deserve, your best
True.
efforts to give them the best results. Good services come from clarity, not constant compliance. So again,
Mm-hmm.
good service does not equal always agreeing with your customer. Boundaries
Mm-hmm.
build trust and they protect your brand's integrity. And you can serve people best by guiding with them, not just agreeing with them. That's a good little tidbit to leave in your brain for the next few days.
Oh yeah, and like if I may, right before we close, like that just reminded me of some reflections on, over since we're celebrating 10 years here in November, I've been reflecting a lot on how this last decade has gone, and I think in the early days, I definitely was very quick to just agree with clients and deliver what they were asking for. And unfortunately, I think that, resulted in lesser outcomes and not as great of results. And it's hard to then point back and be like, okay, well, here's why this happened when I sort of blindly agreed to that. We're now, having more of a balanced approach where it's like, okay, I can hear what you're saying and why you want to go that route. Here are some of my additional ideas and recommendations on why I would suggest this route. And then they can make an informed decision. Because when we feel trapped or pushed into something, we're much less likely to agree with it, collaborate with it, or feel like ownership over it. But if we know our options and we're still choosing, which way to go, then in the end, we can point back to that conversation and like reflect and debrief and say, okay, here's what didn't work and why, here's what did work and why. Now moving forward, here's the adjustments we want to make. And everyone feels more ownership and involvement and accountability for how things progress.
I love that. And it is, I feel like you do have such a unique perspective giving, your 10 years as an agency owner and you have protected Radiant's brand integrity so well and kind of built those healthy boundaries with our clients. And now we get to see them do so much good in the world. So I feel like you're
Thank
kind
you.
of proof, of being able to hold these boundaries and everything puts, your business at the best possible position to give the best outcomes to your clients. So I think you're proof of that.
Yeah, it's teamwork for sure. Thank you, Lauren.
Always, always. Well, that was another myth debunked for you guys. We're excited to have some more episodes coming up this season. And as always, thank you for listening. And we'd love to hear how you audit your business this week. Again, if you have questions, you have comments, feedback for us, you could find us on our socials. You could find us at our blog for some more kind of behind the scenes on this topic. And we're excited to talk to you guys again soon.